As we continue to talk about shaping the aspirations of future cities, we now enter the third segment of our summit, which we call Embracing Shared Prosperity. Now, we have to thrive in our cities, and it's even more enjoyable if we can share all this experience together. Now, speaking of sharing, we'd like to thank once again our sponsors and partners for ARIS 2024. Let's begin with Sub-Zero Wolf, Delivering Asia, PropertyGuru for Business, our supporting partner, Rada Institute, official magazine Property Report by PropertyGuru, official portal partner, PropertyGuru, and our media partners. We have Bridges, Business World, Dedic, Compass.com, Luxury Society Asia, Manila Bulletin, Philippine Star, Prop Tomorrow, and Tatler Homes. Thank you so much. You're all awesome. And thank you so much for the support. Okay, let's now take a moment to watch this clip from our sponsor, Sub-Zero Wolf.
At Sub-Zero and Wolf, we're all about elevating the everyday. Because the food you buy deserves to stay fresh longer. Because if you're going to make a meal, why not make it special? In a Sub-Zero and Wolf kitchen, every detail, every element adds up to experiences worth savoring. Because what matters to you matters to us. Sub-Zero and Wolf, a higher standard.
Big round of applause for one of our wonderful sponsors. Now it's time to welcome our first panel discussion of this afternoon session. They will discuss what it takes to create inspiring spaces and why they are designing for impact. Let's welcome on stage our experts, our moderator, Stephen Pimbley, founder, partner, and director at Spark Architects. We also have Colin Chi, creator and creative director of the uber popular online channel and magazine, Never Too Small. Jessica Bianca-C, Vice President and Head of Design, Innovation and Strategy, SMDC. Patrick Keane, Founder, Enter Projects Asia. Xiaowei Wang, Associate Director and Head of China Office at Zaha Hadid Architects. And we have Thien Dong, Vietnam Studio Leader, Group GSA. Round of applause for everyone.
Hello, everybody. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. I know you've all just had your lunch and it's terribly soporific, but Harry says you've got to stay awake, and if you don't, there's going to be trouble, okay? And this is going to be the best panel discussion of the day, so you better pay attention. So we're just going to start by introducing these great guys. Off you go.
Oh, do I have to introduce myself again? No. I'm Colin Chi. I'm the creator. What else do I do at my company? Well, I'm the founder of Never Too Small, you can call it that way. And Never Too Small is a media company now. We started as a YouTube channel, and now we publish books. And what else do? We publish magazine. We curate design for exhibitions all about small spaces and architecture. And we also organize events occasionally in Melbourne, Australia. And we just moved to a new studio, which is still quite messy. And that's pretty much about it. And my favorite color is green.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jessica C. I'm the Vice President of Design, Innovation, and Strategy at SM Development Corporation and SM Prime Philippines. So we are the largest integrated property developer in the Philippines. So we have a large range of mixed use and developments and commercial and residential ones as well. My favorite color is lavender.
Change my mind about my favorite colors all the time, no matter what rolls through my head. I'm Patrick, the founder of Enter Projects Asia. And when we moved originally to Thailand, we started doing small spaces using plant-based materials, very nature-based projects, yoga studios, small restaurants, Asian fusion design, I like to call it. And then COVID hit and our business just soared as wellness became mainstream and people became aware of actually what we were doing wrong with our environments as they were sitting in isolation. So we're a bit of a patchwork quilt, and we made the story of Enter Projects Asia as we go. But yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry, the what? Oh, my favorite color. Today it's pink.
Hello, everyone. My name is Xiaowei Huang from Zahari Architects. Been with the practice for over 16 years, and we have an office in Asia for over 15 years. Last year, we decided to open the new office. That's how I came to Shenzhen from London. Very happy to be here. Thanks to PropertyGuru to invite us. So we try to engage more with everybody sitting here, and we try to do more projects in Southeast Asia. That's the whole purpose. We set up this strategic location here. So hopefully we can engage with everybody more. Very color?
You're not supposed to be making soft pitches for work, Xiaowei. Tiandong, come on.
Hi, I'm Tian Dong. I don't know who I am. I was just talking to them, outside, and they said, "Why don't you just come on stage?" So here I am. Architect. I'm part of Group GSA. I run the Vietnam studio.
Okay, thank you all. So to kickstart this conversation, I'm sure, well, as Tiandong just said, we had a chat earlier, but I think we'd all agree amongst ourselves as designers that architecture, urban design, the making of cities and places is far more pluralistic in a way than it ever has been. There's no universal language for architecture any longer, certainly since I've started to practice. And interestingly enough, 2024 is 100 years since Corbusier's Ville radieuse, the radiant city. And some would argue, as somebody did last year, that that sort of work of the modern movement was the death knell for inspiration in creating places for communities and designing inspirational places. Now, as last year when somebody said that, I vehemently disagreed with it, but I think it's a very interesting topic, designing inspiring places. So that's the first point of question or conversation. Why bother designing inspiring places? And some examples of that. Recently, I was in the United States, I was in New York, and saw Heatherwick's vessel at Hudson Yards, which I thought was fantastic. A lot of people hate that. I couldn't understand why. It's a very average development in the city, but that's the sort of jewel in the crown. And a project that Patrick and I have seen quite recently, the sort of Henderson project by Zaha in Hong Kong. Wonderful office building. So, Xiaowei, it's a good place for you to start. You can talk about that, sort of pitch a little bit more for Zaha Hadid architects.
Yeah. Maybe
but tell us about that, why it's so good, why it makes a difference to the city. Why is it inspiring?
It's a very good question. I think we talk about a few things. Making a destination, place making, because we try to avoid making something generic. I mean, once you've been given an opportunity, you don't want to lose it. You don't want to do something very, very generic. You want to create a memory point. And you want people coming here, they understand this place is dedicated for here. Because every place, every project we work on, they have a very, very unique character and culture. For instance, Henderson project seems to we pointed at the Henderson project in Hong Kong. The project is sitting at Monty in quite a central location, being surrounded by all the big name architects, Ian Pei and Paul Rudolph, many, many people there around. And when we come in here, we not try to say, oh, we're Zahari architects, we're gonna make something super strong, unique, completely different. No, what we try to do, we try to understand what's the culture, and we want to understand there's a very, very nice symbol, like flower, the plants represent Hong Kong as a spirit. And we take that further, create a petal of the tower, and also with rounded facade, it pay tribute and respect for all the buildings we build around. So when you're standing there, standing in the Charter Square, which is the square right in front of the building, and you look at the project, it reflects all the building around, fosters a HSBC headquarters, and the Iron Pace, the Bank of China, everybody around there. And our project coming here and try to harmonize the overall master plan. And take another example, which is Stephen, we talked about earlier, the Beijing Daxing Airport. And many of you, if you get a chance to fly into Beijing and from Southeast Asia, you probably get a chance to fly in Beijing Daxing Airport, which is their new airport. And we try to create something, this is only for the gateway in China and nowhere else. So that's why the current capital airport, Foster built back to early 2000, that's this called it the symbol of the dragon. So you see the dragon scale. And what we do is 50 kilometers south of the Forbidden City, this is a very, very strong axis. There are so many layers of gate. So that's why we create a new gateway as a phoenix. So which means a phoenix and a dragon go surrounded by the Forbidden City, represent the use a contemporary way to represent the China culture. So that's why we don't want to lose the opportunity.
Okay.
Placemaking and the destination, they're very important.
I'd like to go back to Henderson because I think there's something quite important about it that works on a number of levels. And Patrick, maybe you can add something to this in a moment. I thought it works very good on a city scale, macro scale, because it's very visible. Its shape is very different. But importantly for me, it was the micro scale, the way it made a place for people at its ground floor. So I walked up and around it. I don't know whether you did that, but it's a great destination.
Yeah, it's a very soft, very circular, organic approach. I just commend anybody that has to tackle a developer in Hong Kong without doing boxes and maximizing the space, because they want every square inch. I know as a matter of trivia that it was the most expensive property in the world. Back to our work in public spaces. We just finished a project for the Bangalore airport. We did all the public spaces there with SOM. And we worked with a whole bunch of plant-based materials, namely rattans and bamboos. Materials you'd almost expect to see in a tropical resort or something like that. But this is in a mainstream, high traffic, 20 million people a year area, very, very public space. I think, in terms of shaping an environment, we wanted somebody to feel that they were in a garden, not in an airport. And I think, that placemaking and also designing environments from within that have a special offering like that are much more fundamental and becoming much more important in the city as the general public become more aware and as they're living in urban environments. We design projects that really want to emulate nature and introduce nature on a fundamental level.
So can we talk the sort of macro idea of that, the sort of climate crisis and the need to think about new materiality and how it responds to climate crisis? I know, Jiki, you can talk about this in a moment about a regenerative approach to your projects, but how do you deal with that, the sort of use of new materials? I know all this wonderful rattan that you use in your projects. How is it sourced? How is it used? What technology do you use to conceive these extraordinary things that you make, Patrick?
So for us, sustainability comes in three flavors. Obviously, there's the performance, wind orientation. Second one is the materials, finding something that's very, very local, easily usable, cheap, cost-effective, easy to work with. And then the last one is actually engaging community, the people. So we have an initiative called Project Rattan, where we actually have people coming from all over Thailand and Southeast Asia. And we've revived the rattan arts and crafts industries in Southeast Asia with projects that are not just about making chairs and tables, but whole interior spaces. So our claim to fame with the airport is that we used 9 kilometers of rattan. So imagine all of that in paint or plastics or toxic chemicals. That's a hell of a lot. That's a lot of trees, forests, whatever. So yeah, we work with a very, very simple palette range of materials, hybrid materials, and cheap, readily available materials. That's the key here. And every part of the world has those materials that can be utilized.
So a lot of the clients that we've worked for, and I'm sure it's the same for Tiandong and Zahas, that you have these vacant sites, and sometimes they've demolished the projects. But I'm working with Jika's company, SM, but what's nice about the way they work, they're constantly refreshing their projects, constantly refreshing their buildings, which is terribly important, a sort of very regenerative approach to architecture. I think, do you talk about that a lot at SM?
Yes, absolutely. So because we are a family-owned corporation, we look into the longevity of our businesses. So we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for not just the next 10 years, but actually we look at the next 3 generations. So we look at our buildings that way as well. So when we design, we're, number one, designing for profitability because we are still a corporation. And we believe that that's actually a sustainable way of thinking through profitability and how we can then bring in livability and functionality and sustainability into that. So then next we design for people. That's not just across our mall developments, but our residentials and our other developments as well. And that really goes down to what the usage will look like in the next 20 years, 30 years, and whether we need to start preparing for that now, or is that something that we can afford to redevelop later on. So we have some buildings that are being developed now that are planning for the next 50 years when we look into the seawater levels rising and the different lifestyles of people, and maybe we'll need to accommodate a few more floors onto a tower because the population has grown so quickly. And so that's the kind of thinking that we look at in terms of our retrofitting and reusability of our buildings. So,
Right.
yeah.
That's fantastic. It's a very cool approach, I think. It's a pity a lot more people aren't doing that. When I was studying in the mid-1980s, we were asked to read a book called Small is Beautiful. Do you know that book? By Schumacher, which is, I suppose, one of the very early tomes on sustainability. So I thought I'd talk to Colin about that. And then I read online, because I watched these blogs about social housing in England in the 1970s. There was a great quote by a guy who'd visited, so I'll read it and perhaps you can respond to it. The journalist was Ian Nairn, who coined the word subtopia. Subtopia was his reaction to sort of drab suburbs as a result of poor planning, which I suppose goes back to that Corbusian idea and people doing bad versions of Corbusier. But he said, I'm a city dweller. My idea of home is a very small flat, 40 square meters, maybe. No possessions and the whole city to use as his drawing room, library, and dining room. I thought that was very beautiful and something that I've heard you talk about before, but why is that important, do you think? Do you think it's important for city dwellers to acknowledge that they need to live in smaller apartments to make things more sustainable?
I suppose when we talk about sustainability, we often think about, how we make energy efficient and whatnot, but sometimes when you reduce the footprint, it's still way more sustainable in terms of when you want to buy something, want to consume something, you think about whether there's a space to put it. And that's the easiest way of being sustainable. And the other thing you talk about is journalists, and there's a great stories about Barbican in London that like one night the sun went down in the 1940s and the next morning the whole part of the city flattened by the German. And then take them 25 years to think what to do with the area in City of London, what to do with it. And then 25 years later, they decided to build Barbican, which is the combination of what we call the mixed-use residential commercial, but they went on a bit further. They built a whole Barbican Center, which is the gallery, 2 theaters and a concert hall and 2 schools. And then it's create a little sort of, what do you call it? Like a little mini cities within the City of London. And people hated it in the 70s and even 80s. But then after 40 years later, it became like such a significant part of London and also become a case studies for many architects, new architects. We keep thinking about we're going to do mixed use and a lot of these kind of things, but it's been done before. But if we are looking back, what have been done before, the ideas is there. But then when we talk about small livings, there's a lot of developers doing a great job. But then we talk a lot about the external of the buildings, like how the community can hang out, how we can foster a relationship between the neighbors. But a lot of the time, the innovation or the experimentation ends there. But then I would love to see more developers put more thoughts into the actual internal spaces in the small apartments. Anything under 50 square meters, I really think the flexible floor plan should be implied. And the reason is when we talk about small spaces, most of people who live in small spaces, either singles or couples, or if you have children, you can. But then there are more young people who's trying to chase their dream. They're still young. And then they are from different backgrounds. Because if we can afford to live in big spaces, we have really live in big spaces, but living small is more like affordability kind of options. And then when we think about people living in the city, we think about people who's in service industry or nurses or teachers, and or even myself, I can't afford to buy big houses. That's why I live in a micro apartment. And this is why when we think about that, we can cater the design, become much more flexible. But at the same time, when we think about diversity and multicultural, let's say in Australia, we have so many different races, and even Malaysia or Singapore, when we think about designing small spaces, it has to be almost flexible in terms of, like I'm being Chinese, I don't want to go in the apartment and straight away see my kitchen, and then I want to see an entranceway, so how can we do it? I think, Zika, you have a micro apartment that have a flexible wall or something.
Oh, we design our apartments because they're quite small at
Yeah.
24 square meters, so that if you are a growing family, you can purchase the unit next door or a smaller unit beside you and knock down a certain portion of the wall so that it can grow with you.
Yeah, and I just want to add on quickly. And recently I was in Japan, and one of the architects that we interviewed for our magazine and also our video channels, the company is called CFIT, SCFIT. What they do is they design a whole lot of modular furnitures that become a portable wall. So you can separate your living room and the bedroom using the portable furnitures, and then with a bit of a twist of a screw, and then the furniture can actually attach to the ceiling. And it's great because, you know, when you have a family of 3, you have a baby, you don't need that much space, but when your family grow, maybe you can, you know, adjust the sizes of the rooms. And, you know, if you have a bigger family, you probably have to move out.
I think what you forgot to say about the Barbican, which for me is the most important thing. Yes, the spaces are small and they're still in high demand and very high cost, but it's the balance of open space and wonderful green courtyard at the center. And I'm sort of reminded of something that we're doing in Ho Chi Minh City for a developer there in the Sasaki master plan, that the quality of the space that's afforded to the tenants, both at an apartment level and on the ground floor, which engages with the local community, is terribly important. Do you see a lot of that in the work that you're doing in Vietnam?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think it's amazing with this panel on stage. Do we have a show of hands of like developers in the audience? Anyone developers? Can they just have a quick look? Yeah. So I just want to say that this group is quite amazing. Like this guy, you guys should look up Zaha Hadid, okay? So if you don't know, right? It speaks for itself, right? This guy does textile, craftsman, artisan, like what is like kilometers of like sustainable products, right? Completely different. Like that building, we were talking about building, it was like all stainless steel, completely unsustainable, right? This guy, right? But it's quite amazing. You go in there, you're like, wow, you know, everywhere you look, it's wow, right? And this guy, you know, everything, he couldn't find a builder, so he had to build his own team to build the stuff that he designs. So I think it's amazing. And Stephen, okay, so, you know, if you guys don't know...
I'm glad you mentioned me, because I'm suffering from FOMO at the moment.
No, well, just look up Sparks, right? Clark Keys, say no more, right? So for me, someone once told me that you should always leave a place better than you found it. You know? Like, just leave it better than you found it. But after meeting you guys, I'm thinking, that's not good enough, you know? It's about defining spaces, whether it's big, it's iconic, whether it's small, right? Whatever you guys are doing, it's leave a place with a huge wow factor with this group. And I think that's something to take away. it's not enough, I think, to just develop and to make money and just to, meet the standards of the regulations and all that sort of thing. It's about inspiring, right? And at the end of the day, you guys, the developers, right? You have a responsibility to redefine spaces. It's gonna live longer than us, right? So think about, look these guys up. Okay, and the project in Ho Chi Minh, like when I heard Steven say, he's going to come to Ho Chi Minh. So Vietnam, you've got China, you've got Thailand, Philippines, Melbourne, Australia, and then you got Singapore, right? So Asia, this melting pot of all kinds of creativity and inspiration, right? So I'm so happy to hear that you coming to Vietnam, Steven.
Thank you very much, Tien Dong. That's why we asked him onto the stage. He's a great promoter of architects.
He's a wow factor.
Thank you very much. Now, completely off-piste, actually, because we had a nice conversation earlier on, and we started to talk about the Jetsons. And I'd sat through the sort of future housing conversation earlier on, and I thought nobody mentioned the Jetsons. Does anybody know what the Jetsons are? I loved the Jetsons when I was growing up, the sort of Flintstones and the Jetsons. And the Jetsons were, well, you tell them what the Jetsons were.
Now they're going to see your age, right? Yeah. Jetsons, right? No, we had a conversation, right? Shall we? That I had no idea, He's talking about, in China, they're doing drones. Can you imagine? They're starting to think about spaces where drones can fly. Forget about cars. They're going to fly you from one place to the next, right? I'm sitting there, oh, wow, and I'm in Vietnam, right? We're on motorbikes still.
But that's very interesting. So I just chip in. Yeah, because when we talked about this earlier, we had a very good conversation. We talked about this called low sky economics, especially it start affect them, and also start a lot of developers start thinking, what about how to design my balcony? Because right now, like we're based in Shenzhen at the moment, there's several developers start looking to say, is my balcony big enough? The reason why I ask these questions is because the drones start flying into a balcony and they pick you up and they take you to where you want to go. So which means that there's a lot of topics which is that people start looking into this. So even the shopping mall, the rooftop of the shopping mall, the rooftop of lots of this parking structure, they start looking into the space to design a drone port where they can park the drone taxi and everything. So it's a very, very interesting phenomenon.
I think, Xiaowei, you should explain to them what low sky technologies are, because it's a very China-specific thing at the moment. And most people in the audience will know what it is. So do you want to talk about that? Talk about Shenzhen and what's going on there.
Yeah, maybe I can spend a minute talk about it, because low sky economy is a big, you can call it a supply chain. Of course, from the AI technology, and the people start developing this a drone taxi and all these flying objects. But the related is not just those technology and the IT stuff. The property, the real estate developer, they start coming in saying, oh, this is actually a great opportunity for all of us, which means that we need to start design the unit, design my product as a high resilient, can adapt to what's happening in the future. And that's lots of financial factors that are going to come in. So that's why the low sky economy become quite a hot topic right now. It's affect not just the industry, it actually affects all different levels. So that's very interesting.
Well, it affects things like infrastructure, of course, because the traffic jams we all suffer every day, they'll be a thing of the past. People will be buzzing around in their Jetsons type. It's not far away, I don't think. Well, they're selling them to the UAE. They're testing them in Shenzhen.
You guys know, it's coming in 5 years, okay? So you'll be sitting in these drones flying around the cities, right? You know Trump's in back to politics, right? And the good news is he's got Elon Musk on his side, right? And they're pushing innovation, right? But I think what's interesting is in China right now, if you guys are at that forefront of technology, and China starts and it kind of merges into the rest of Asia, So whether we can't be ignorant about this stuff, right? It's coming, right? And China, Asia is here, and we need to take the reins, don't we?
Another 30 seconds.
Don't apologize.
Yeah.
Just carry on.
I'm originally from Taiwan, so that's why the semiconductor and all the IT developments is still a very hot topic, provide those AI supply chain. But when we talk about this low sky economics, have an impact on the infrastructure. On the other hand, everybody look at it, okay, I'm going to build my apartment, I'm going to have a charging station, whichever for my EV. Okay, we might need to think a little bit ahead because there's lots of developers already start looking into it. Said, am I going to develop the hydrogen station, have a space to preserve that? Because the hydrogen-based batteries is coming very soon, the next 5 years or 7 years, especially in Japan. So that's why there's something we always need to think 10 or 20 years from now. That's very important.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the city because we're supposed to be talking about places in the city. So we might be in trouble if we don't. We all like going on holiday. I mean, you travel around a lot. You always like to be on holiday, don't you, Colin? I was in Barcelona a few months ago and walking around the Gothic quarter and looking at projects by Gaudi. And it sort of occurred to me that we haven't designed a decent city for about 200 years. And I was wondering why, the tactile quality of those old European cities, whether it's in the south of France, the northern Italian hill towns, places like Barcelona, they have a great humanity to them. The scale is right. So why aren't we designing cities of that quality any longer that mean something to the pedestrian? Why is that? Yes.
There's a book. Can I jump in? Yeah, there's a book by Thomas Hathaway about humanize. That's the first thing he talked about in his book about the Gaudi's design.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, and recently in our Never Too Small magazine, we write about Hundertwasserhaus. And it's similar thing, like, how do we not design buildings the way we used to do?
The Hundertwasserhaus in Vienna.
Yeah, in Vienna. And then, of course, I think it's to do with first profit, but I think profit has to be for every businesses. But I think people like to do things according to the rules and make it quick bucks. And what we are really lacking these days is to look back. I think a lot of the experience that I had in different cities in Europe is so different than Asia is the scale. Over here, we like to look at the city from the top down, but in Europe, my experience is that we look at the city by looking up.
Yeah.
And we feel the street is much smaller. And like in Madrid, apartment feels so different. The height of the ceiling is very generous. And then, of course, a lot of rules. Especially in Australia, we have too much rules, and that's lead to less innovation.
But Chika, in the buildings that you guys do at SM, you need to draw in people, of course. They need to have a good time. You want them to spend a lot of time there, to spend more money. But you need to invest in creating good quality places. How do you go about that, do you think?
Yeah, so I also read Thomas Heatherwick's book, very good, can recommend. But I think a lot of it is a little bit of a two-part. Like the issue itself I see as quite two-sided. So there's a little bit of laziness in terms of on the developer side. It's like it's very easy to just make a building look bland and get the most out of it because you're maximizing spaces and it becomes the most profitable. But if you take a step back and actually think about what the long-term usage would be and how you can integrate that into now the design of the building, we can see that there are actually ways, like your rattan ceilings, to bring down costs and still improve profitability, but bring in that human factor. And then the other side of it is, I think we often think as designers, to cater to a large audience and to cater to the mass rather than to think about specific people. So when you cater to a mass, the mass audience, everything becomes a little bit more bland. You take away elements that bring in personality. And I think that's something that we're still missing in cities. Yeah. So as we start developing cities and really bringing them in, bringing different developments in, we have to think intentionally about how we almost encourage developers and people who are going to be building their homes to still add personality and think about what others will be looking at and what others will be experiencing, not just the initial localized units.
Yeah, there used to be an expression for that called putting lipstick on the gorilla, that developers build horrible boxes and expect somebody talented to tart them up, to use an expression. But if you're sophisticated about it, it can be very successful. And the stuff you've done, things like Bangalore, it's another layer of tactility, another layer of visual interest that really adds value to the product.
So we sometimes look at a building or a project like Bangalore and say, do we actually need to build walls? Do we need to segregate the spaces? And the answer was no. So we did a whole series of rattan pods, and they acted like screens to actually open out the space, but also give privacy. So I think a lot of companies, by default, are overbuilding projects. For example, the ceiling here is probably built 3 or 4 times. Over materiality, overuse of projects. So what we try and do is actually examine the building process. Yes, we're designers, we're creative types. We actually try and always start from zero in our projects and find out what's actually needed. Optimizing concrete structures. Can we reduce the slab thickness? Can we be really intelligent with building systems? We do a lot of kind of artsy and craftsy projects, but behind that, the technology is huge. The more artistic we become, the more we actually have to rely on the technology. But back to cities, I think, in summary, we could talk about this the whole day, but I think it's actually about engaging the community, because for me, culture, as I've seen it, as I know it, always starts from within and grows out, rather than taking somebody else's culture and trying to borrow that or copy that. So I think it's a really exciting time for Southeast Asia, because we talk about Asian fusion, which is used in food, but I think culturally now that's coming together in spaces and design. So, Asia's the hotspot for us, and I think it's a great place to be based.
Great. I want to sort of wrap up by talking a little bit about AI. I know last year's event, Ares, was focused on AI, which was very inspiring conversation, actually. Some very bright people talking about AI. Harry mentioned it at the introduction this morning, but, it's a little bit like crypto is going to completely change the financial markets and the way we all bank, etc. And AI is disrupting, for a better word, the way that we do business, the way that we draw, the way that we think about making the architecture and the buildings. But how are we going to stay relevant? How are we going to be at Ares, the 20th edition of Ares? And what are we going to have to say? So how do we stay relevant in the face of all this extraordinary technology? Who wants to talk about that? How about you?
Sure. AI, yeah. Well, to be really frank with you, we spent almost 10 years to spend time to researching this topic, but we only scratched the surfaces. One of the big things is actually for the architects, the designer, there's a lot of still a human factor, like you said, the community engagement, culture, there's a lot of different aspects. We spend a lot of time doing the machine training, but still, it still requires a lot of advanced technology, which is probably haven't even been developed yet. So that's why all of us here, we still have jobs. Yeah, it's very important. Yeah, so that's why we very appreciate that.
Tian Dong, do you want to add something to that? I mean, you're getting to the end of your career, just like I am. Aging well, I have to say aging well, that, you've got another 10 years or so.
I have a shampoo which turns my hair black. If you want to, I can give you the brand.
I need all the help I can get.
But I think at the end, talking about cities, right? So in the 70s, the Americans made a big mistake. They decide to segregate, communities where, this area, this zone is offices, this zone is commercial, and then this zone is residential, and you get all the suburbs and everything else, right? But in Asia, mixed use, what became mixed use development was always in Asia. People lived where they sold their products, and the mixed use was always here. At the end of the day, with all this AI going around, it's about humans interacting with humans. And so the word community, I think, is important. I think when design, if you can walk, actually, the perfect ideal world is if you can walk to work, walk to shop, walk to meet your friends, right? In an environment which you find interesting, you know? So at the end of the day, it's that like human contact. Where do we want to be in the metaverse having this conversation, looking at you beautiful people? No, right? We want to be here and talking to each other and you know, smell each other, whether it's good or bad, right? So I think that's, as designers...
I think you should stop touching him, actually. You should stop touching him.
I had admired his Zaha Hadid building so much that you know, anyway.
Anybody else want to add something on AI?
Sure. I think AI is great and we love utilizing it for data analytics and even design work, but it should just kind of be used, at least how we see it, as a guide, because at the end of the day, are we going to be designing for life or for machines? Or are we going to be redesigning our lives for the machines or for machines to be designed for life? So that's how we see utilizing AI, that we can use it as inspiration and guiding us. But the human factor, who we are designing for at the end of the day, really still needs to take precedence.
You're using AI, Patrick, aren't you?
We use AI religiously because we want to know more about it. I've got somebody actually in the office that all he does is he's doing his thesis on Mid-Journey, and he's able to work with different scales and with different environments and different qualities. So we use it to see how we can generate atmosphere, but he's so in tune with the product and the machine, it's almost like him doing a sketch or something like that. And the results are outstanding. So it actually, in summary, it enables us to think more dynamically. It puts more options on the table. It allows us to free ourselves up a little bit and explore things. So for us, it's incredibly exciting and incredibly dynamic.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And the way we work through these sort of large language models in the studio, you know, exponentially changing the way that we practice, actually, and sort of looking forward to what's going to happen, because it's changing so quickly. It's unbelievable. Okay, I think we've done. Thank you very much, everybody. I must say thank you very much. I was a little bit surprised at the Radast video at the beginning. There were no women in it, just a bunch of crusty uncles. Where were all the women? Leave you with that thought. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, panelists.